Hello, everybody. My name is Bradley Hassey, aka Sir Bradley from the Junior Classics podcast, and I have a very special, fascinating guest to me, Robb Wolf. And I thought it would be fun if Robb introduced himself, because after you guys might be like, what the heck does this have to do with children's literature and whatnot? But this is mostly for the parents, and I'm going to show you guys why Robb has a lot to offer you guys. So Robb, why don't you introduce yourself, because you have evolved over the last several years, and just tell us where you're at now.
Most of my evolution seems to be my hair going from my head to my back, but
right.
So I'm not really losing it. It's just a relocation program. But I guess germane to kids and parenting and whatnot. I am the father of two girls, 9 and 7-year-old girls. Husband to an Italian wife, so I am kept in line pretty rigorously. And then by training, I was a biochemist, a research biochemist in the areas of autoimmunity and cancer. Developed a pretty significant health crisis, ulcerative colitis, 22 years ago. Bad enough that I was facing a surgery or some pretty nasty chemotherapeutic interventions. And I was looking at an MD PhD track for a graduate program. And I knew enough about the ulcerative colitis condition that I knew that I didn't want to do that. Like if you have to do it, it'll save your life, but it's not a fix. Your life is irreparably changed after that. And again, like in certain situations, it's totally appropriate. It can save your life, but I wanted to do something else, and through some kind of interesting circumstances, I started investigating kind of ancestral diet and lifestyle, trying to look at, is there anything worth learning from the period of time before agriculture and maybe even before recorded history as it might relate to human health. It's interesting, like if we wander over into veterinary medicine, it's not really a controversial topic to say, you should probably feed a cat the way that cats are optimized. You should feed a dog the way that dogs are optimized. But then when it comes to humans, there's this controversy around, that there might be some things that are more optimized and less optimized for kind of, effective human health. And so for the last 22 years, I've been talking about writing. I wrote 2 New York Times best-selling books, and we've had a top-rank iTunes podcast for over 10 years. And we basically just talk about health and wellness through this kind of evolutionary or ancestral health lens. And, knock on wood, but we've been able to help a lot of people. And oftentimes it's the folks that have run the gamut of conventional medical interventions. And once you get beyond like a gunshot wound or getting hit by a bus or what have you, conventional medicine is amazing for emergency medicine, for life-critical things. But then when we start dealing with chronic degenerative disease, we have to be honest, it's not really that good. It's not that effective at dealing with it. And I would argue that this kind of ancestral health perspective is very comparatively infinitely more effective than kind of the conventional medical model. And
absolutely.
Long-winded, rambling intro. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of those people you've helped is me and my family, and just for all the parents out there. So how Robb will mesh with most of the parents of my listeners is I run with a crowd that is very into health, very into starting to homestead. Seems like the trend's going there. Basically, they want more agency in their life, to become more sovereign, to not be part of a dependent class, which is kind of like an idea that I've been thinking about lately. And your podcast was the first one I ever listened to. And I went to a CrossFit gym in 2010, and I started hearing people talk about how bread like wasn't healthy for you. And I was like, get out of here. What are you guys talking about? And, I just started looking into it because I found it interesting. And I think it was like a statement in the CrossFit Level 1 manual, which is just kind of hilarious to even bring that up. But there was a statement about like, perhaps like the most destructive or way to like destroy the capacity of America, whatever, just be, the way that we eat. And I was like, man, like that's That's a really powerful statement. Like maybe I should think about more about this. Anyway, so I've listened to you for a long time. I've learned a lot from you, and you've actually prepared my family for 2 health crises that we had not too long ago. I myself have ulcerative colitis that I'm dealing with, been doing okay with it. And my son also has a kidney issue that we had to deal with. But kind of like you were talking about the other day on your show with your daughter having the peanut allergy, it's like you do everything you think you can and stuff still happens. So don't beat yourself up about it. But you've prepared my family to at least, we were not in crisis mode. We were like, well, we know how to pull this lever. We know how to turn that dial and get things ratcheted in the best we know how. So when it comes to health, homesteading, and really, I've always enjoyed when you've gone off the rails on your show, so to say, and pontificated on what like alternative versions of food, economic, medical systems, like what they could look like. And I really find your unique lens of looking at things through like sustainability, regenerative agriculture, resiliency, optimal human health. I find that fascinating when you talk about like those systems and what they could look like. And also your stuff's not fear-based. You basically just lay it out. These are some incentives that seems to be driving these things. And then here's some solutions that we possibly could provide for that. So let's talk about homeschool first, because you've homeschooled your daughters. Why did you decide to do that? What went into you guys making that decision, and why do you think that's more optimal, or why does that work for your family?
It's interesting. We now live in Montana. 2 years, we spent 2 years in Texas, and prior to that, we were in Reno, Nevada for almost 10 years. And we thought that we were going to be there over the long haul. And both girls were in a Montessori program. And for preschool and kindergarten, it was pretty good. But we discovered that for first grade and beyond, like the school goes through 8th grade, there was this weird element of education of not holding kids' feet to the fire, not holding them accountable, had infiltrated even into this Montessori program. So like kids would get exposed to things, but then they were given the license to go do whatever it was that they wanted to do, instead of like, okay, yeah, if you want to play guitar or play in the creek or whatever, that's great, but we have to do some math, we have to do some spelling. And we discovered that our oldest, the year of first grade, effectively she did nothing. I mean, it was she went retrograde on math, reading, and spelling from first grade relative to kindergarten, which is gut wrenching. And she had a good time because she played a lot and had some good friends, but we looked around and the public school options were not really that appealing in this area, unfortunately. And we really looked and I had been curious about Texas for a long time as a possible place to relocate. And relatively, the public school systems there are really remarkably good, particularly in that like San Antonio going up to New Braunfels area, the hill country of Texas, really quite good schools. And so we moved there with the thought that we would have a fallback of public school, but we also wanted to try this homeschool deal because my wife and I have worked from home for a long time. We have the opportunity to go travel, and if I've got an internet connection, I'm very, very fortunate. I can run my business and do my stuff. And so it was like, hey, we could be in Italy for a chunk of time, or we could be in Costa Rica for a chunk of time, or we just do some cool enrichment things from home. And so it was 2019 that we started spinning up the homeschool deal. And there was about a 3-month period that it was kind of like, oh my God, what have we done? We're in over our head. But my wife is very good at math, but also particularly good at languages. She's fluent in Italian and Spanish, muddles through a little bit of Russian. And so she's quite good on that. Nice. I'm pretty good at math. And so I kind of run the kids' math part. She runs the spelling, reading, writing, and really the rest of it, we kind of feel like whatever the kids' interests are, we can weave in history and art and different things like that. And so we had that year of 2019 to kind of shake the shake the, the rust off of the process. And then when COVID hit, we were just like, oh my God, we're the smartest people in the room.
Right.
Like we
got
were
insulated
doing this stuff. There was no disruption with that. And honest to God, we threaten the kids sometimes. Like what we've laid out for them is you guys need to be good students ready to go. Like I captain, like we're going to do this stuff, or we'll stick you in regular school. And the kids are like, please no, I will do well, and so far it seems to be going really well. Like we can teach to mastery on topics instead of just like having a specific curriculum that, okay, well today it says we're doing this and we're going to do this, and whether you get it or not, we have to move on. So whether, particularly on the math, the system we use is called Math UC, and the kids see it, then they do it, and there's some like manipulatives with it. So like different colored blocks that represent different numbers, and it's really cool. Like it teaches you algebra and all kinds of stuff with that. And then the end stage is that the kid needs to be able to teach the material back to you as if you didn't know it. And until the kid can teach it back to you in a satisfactory way, they don't really understand it. And so that is the point where we move forward. And man, I look back at what I did and I'm like, I never did that.
Right.
And so, so far that's been really good. We have a summer science project of catching turtles because we live near a small lake here in Montana, and we have already caught about 6 turtles. And so we've been researching turtles and how do you tell the sex, their size, their weight? Are there any interesting physical characteristics? Where do you catch it? And we're basically going to take photos and then do a little bit of kind of field biology, documenting information. And then at the end of the summer, we're going to put all that together and do like a Costco.com book where we basically create a book around our summer science project of collecting turtles. And so we're getting in some history, some biology, some basic scientific method of consistently weighing and measuring things. Like you do it 3 times and then you take the average, and why we do that. And so, and the kids are just like, they are out there like trying to catch turtles every single day, and they've got their little notebooks and all that. And you think about trying to convince a kid that measuring something 3 times in a row and then taking the average is an interesting thing. You would be nuts until you find something that they're really excited about, like catching turtles. So the homeschool deal has provided this opportunity to do all this cool stuff and teach them virtually everything that they're ever going to need to know, until they decide to potentially specialize in something. It puts it in a context where they're excited. And man, if somebody's excited about something, like you have to stick them in a locked cell to keep them from doing that thing, whereas if somebody is uninterested in a topic, it's a very rare person that will rally the resources to do work on that topic. So that's what homeschool has done for us. It's provided this latitude for kind of our lifestyle, but also it's allowed us to, really cater to the interests of the kids. And we definitely hold their feet to the fire. Like there are some expectations about progress and process and all that type of stuff. But at the same time, the one daughter is really into wolves, another daughter is really into lynx. And so we can steward a bunch of their curriculum around wolves and lynx. And that's awesome. There's history and biology and botany and physics and all kinds of stuff that can be taught around those interests.
Nice. Speaking of wolves in Montana, I think I'm not sure I heard this from, but I heard there's this like snowmobile excursion you can go on where you can follow a pack of wolves hunting. And I was like, man, that would be, that's gotta be on my bucket list for sure.
Yep.
So what do you think would have been your biggest challenges and joys through this homeschooling process?
Challenges and joys. The joy, just the amount of time that we get to spend with the kids, which sometimes you're also like, man, I just want an hour alone.
Sure.
We work from home. We have a home gym. We all go to jiu-jitsu together. The whole family does jiu-jitsu. And then homeschooling. So we spend a lot of time together, but our oldest daughter is 9 years old, and it's gone by in a blink. And so the amount of time that we're able to
spend together is amazing. So that definitely, I think, is one of the biggest things. and we get that a lot too, the interlopers. And then challenges. I would say it's the flip side of that. Like sometimes the family needs some space, like Nikki and I were just talking the other day, my wife, I was like, hey, we need to start doing some divide and conquer. Like the whole family doesn't need to go shopping. Like one of us should go shopping. Maybe if a kid wants to go shopping, they can go with us. But the hour that I spend shopping or even getting gas in my car, I'm just like, oh, this is nice. I can listen to the podcast I want to listen to, do some stuff like that. So I would say for us personally, the biggest challenge is actually too much time together. And because we moved, 3 months ago, like there's just all the chaos in the process. We had a 6 or 9 month period of looking for somewhere to move. And so you're just unsettled. And then we've had 3 months here in Montana where we're kind of getting our roots established, but you still don't know a lot of people. We don't really have kid coverage. So we haven't had a date night, and some things like that. So the too much time together has honestly been the biggest challenge for us. I think if, if I worked out of the house 2 or 3 days a week and Nikki worked out of the house 2 or 3 days a week, I think it would be maybe even a little bit more optimum in a way, because there would be that distance and you can actually miss each other a little bit. Like, hey, tell me about your day. But when we sit down at the dinner table, there isn't much tell me about your day because we were all together. Like the only time we really get that is when they go to jiu-jitsu class or like horseback riding or something where it's like, so what did you do there? And, so that distance actually creates the opportunity for some newness and for some part of their life to occur that we weren't immediately a part of. And so they can share that with us.
Awesome. Yeah. Like I was saying, a lot of the families, most of the families that listen to me, they're very committed to becoming more self-reliant in terms of controlling their own food source, becoming responsible for their family's health, education, not just like outsourcing, everything. And what I admire and respect about you is you seem to, through your health issues, you kind of came online to some of this stuff maybe earlier than other people, and you shared that knowledge with everyone. The other thing is just this idea of turning a household into, it seems like now a household or a home, maybe like in general, is kind of a place of consumption and leisure, recreation. But how can I think a lot of people want to make their household productive in terms that benefits like their family. So it seems like a lot of people are starting to turn away from maybe like just blindly following institutional guidelines, and they're starting to seek knowledge from more obscure, perhaps, but like knowledgeable individuals like yourself. Have you noticed that trend emerging? Do you think it's accelerating? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that was happening a lot anyway. And then COVID just like created a flashpoint
gasoline
on this thing. Yeah. It's interesting. And I don't say this in a bragging way because we've honestly, so you made a statement that which I really appreciate. I really do try to not broker in fear. If there's, what I talk a lot about is risk, like, what's the risk profile and how do you mitigate that if you want to mitigate that? And honestly, I've been surprised that like the world in general hasn't suffered a really remarkable dislocation sooner than what has happened. Like I was very attuned to like the financial bubble that we were running up into in 2008. And we had dried food and we had some water and we had some redundant energy production options and stuff like that. And so, I've honestly been surprised that things haven't gotten squirrely before this. And so when COVID happened, I was like, well, of course, a aerosolized, viral vector is going to waylay the civilization. Like this is just one of these like main existential threats. It's like a comet hitting the planet, a super volcano, nuclear war. There's just these lists of things that I wouldn't fixate on, but you can do some risk mitigating around that stuff. And so we had some food, we had some water, we had some backup energy production stuff. And it didn't, and then just psychologically, I knew that was a possibility. So when this rolled out, we really didn't have that paralysis or period of fear that oftentimes people experience in kind of a crisis scenario where it could take hours, days, or weeks before they kind of wrap their head around like, oh man, things have changed. Like the world has changed, but we've definitely seen a big transition since then. We have an online community called the Healthy Rebellion, and it's interesting. The fact that the world changed, the fact that there were some mild food shortages and stuff like that, people were paying attention. They're like, oh, this could have been far, far worse. Like we could have really had a terrible situation occur here. Not to say that it hasn't been terrible, but the SARS-CoV-1 virus had a 15% fatality rate. That could be a civilization ender just because you have enough key people that die. Like nobody knows how to run the nuclear power plant. Nobody is left that can run trains or drive trucks. I mean, it's and that is a not difficult thing to imagine happening. So we've seen a massive influx of people that are very interested in kind of the homesteading resiliency process. I guess circumventing the standard information channels, like it's interesting, the toxicity of social media and also kind of this cancel culture feature has caused a lot of people to seek out alternate venues for some decent information because no one person can stay on top of everything, but
or you go crazy trying.
Yeah. And if you get a group of people, a couple of hundred, a few thousand people, and everybody is committed to helping one another, you have a really remarkable opportunity for some very smart people, subject matter experts. You have some engineers, you have some healthcare providers, you have some people that are experts in food production. They can sift through a lot of this and they can give you some best practices about, you live in this arid environment. Here's what I would recommend on like some rainwater catchment and, food production. And where you live, I don't know that I would even try to grow that much food. I would just get very good at hunting and drying and canning and that type of stuff. And so you can get some really remarkable information. And something I mentioned to my wife the other day, it's interesting. Everything customer service related, the attempt is to automate it. So there's no human being on the back end because humans require a paycheck and healthcare, and there's some cost associated with it. But I wanted to buy some sort of a grill, and I read online, and it's like, okay, it's got all these Amazon reviews or what have you, but I'm like, I still don't know which one I want. And I told my wife, I just want to go into a place that like there's some reasonably knowledgeable person and they ask me 3 or 4 questions. Well, how often are you going to use it? And what's the largest number of family members, and then they're like, sir, I think you should do this one versus that one. It's like sold, done. Like, I think all of us reach decision fatigue by like noon most days. Like most people, particularly if they're in this kind of more self-actualized, like you are the captain of your own boat kind of deal. You make decisions from the moment you start making decisions all the time. And I'm not running down folks that maybe have more of a corporate job, but you kind of show up, you plug into the machine, and oftentimes there's not really that much, well, should I do this or should I do that? And when you are exposed to all that, the decision-making process, it can get very fatiguing because you're not really sure what you should do. And so having a community of people that you can lean on to help with things like, should I do this backup generator or that one? And having someone that cares about you and asks some good questions and then gives you some, okay, I would pick between this one, and these are the pros and cons of the two of them. Like, that's where I see folks really benefiting from these more off grid or off the mainstream community interactions, because we do live in a remarkably complex world. Although I think the goal of being more self-sufficient is very laudable, there's kind of a reality, like I can't mine oil and turn it into gasoline. Like I'm
Right.
never going to be able to do that, you know? So there is some dependency there. I being a chemist, I could in theory probably spin up some penicillin, you know, if I set up the right scenario, but you know, like having access to some pharmaceuticals is going to be a really important, you know, feature of my kind of resiliency play, whether that's banked or you know, what have you, but having good information about all that, I think is incredibly valuable. And to get back to your original question, I think there's a massive groundswell of people looking at things like that. And ironically, kind of the information brokers, whether it's the WHO, the CDC, mainstream media, social media, they really don't like that independence. And I don't think that this is conspiracy theory at all. Like those folks actively kind of suppress and marginalize folks who are working towards some degree of independence, whether it's independence of thought or independence of just, you know, the way that you live your life. And I think that that's telling. I don't know that anywhere in history, when you look at the people that were trying to broker the truth, those people ever ended up being the good guys.
Right.
You know, so yeah, it's interesting.
Well, let's play off of you bringing up community and the healthy rebellion. Another trend I've noticed is a lot of these people creating alternate tech. Not sure how else to say it, but now people have their own, basically a community of social media of you know, fellow people who are interested in what they're interested in. So I'm on the Healthy Rebellion, so I know all about that. There's like a business one that I'm part of, but it seems like the trend is going to this alt tech. What made you move in that direction? Was that something you thought about for a while? You saw that coming, or was that just kind of a random idea you had?
It's funny. It was Google and Facebook trying to make our business disappear. Honestly, within the span of a week, everything that we were selling on Facebook just our ability to sell it at a profit disappeared. And we had a very good business selling information products like the Keto Masterclass and different types of resets, and everything in that scene has a life cycle, but it went from quite good to just falling off a cliff. And then it was maybe a week, 2 weeks after that I had a text message from Chris Kresser and Mark Sisson. They're like, hey, have you checked your site analytics? And we had lost overnight 97% of our site traffic. So I had a website that had been around over 10 years and had hundreds of first page search results on a host of things, you know, ketogenic diet for chronic kidney disease, and, you know, like a bunch of different things. And all of that kind of disappeared. It was still there, but people had a hell of a time finding it. Like you would need to know to put in Robb Wolf chronic kidney disease. Whereas before, if somebody had put in ketogenic diet, kidney health, I would have been one of the first search returns. And there were a good number of people that were caught up. I believe it was called the OWL Google update, you know, and the explanation there was that, oh no, we're really not penalizing certain websites. It's just, we expect you to have certain standards of how you update your material and whatnot. And we're super diligent on that. All of our material is primary generated. Like we did all the stuff that was supposed to fit those guidelines. What was interesting is the folks that were caught in that first round of updates were mainly in the low carb scene, kind of this ancestral health scene. And I will say a good number of those people are very far out on the, like, say, like anti-vaccine kind of scenario. Some of them believe that 5G is going to barbecue your innards and stuff like that. Yeah. So it was an interesting mix. Like I would say that some of the folks were very far out into some of these theories. Some people would say that my stuff is very far out there. You know, I feel, you know, it's kind of whatever, but there were a group of people that were caught up in that. And we literally were in this spot where I was like, okay, so our ability to reach people through standard means is effectively gone. And we are totally beholden to the tech monopolies to be able to reach people with the current setup that we have. And how do we work around that? Like, one thought was, okay, we throw in the towel and maybe I finally open up like a cidery distillery and I quit selling health and start selling booze, which is something that is still in the back of my head. Yeah. Like, if COVID taught me anything, in good times people drink and in bad times people drink more. So maybe that's a really good resiliency play, you know, from a financial perspective. But we had a pretty sizable email list, and we thought about this paywall, and also seeing, and this is like end of 2018, beginning of 2019, the toxicity of social media, particularly around like the election run up and stuff like that, was just getting to a fever pitch. So I didn't really want to be a significant part of that. We needed a way to reach people in an alternate way that hopefully the tech monopolies couldn't just like crimp that stuff off. And so we launched this Healthy Rebellion, and the Healthy Rebellion has this goal of liberating 1 million people from the sick care system. The primary point that we have on that is we want you to figure out what your metabolic health is, and we have some very inexpensive testing that we recommend that people do so that we know where you are in that story. Depending on where you are in that story, then we want to connect you with some sort of a functional medicine practitioner or health coach to help keep you on path. And then finally, I really feel strongly that the payer piece of healthcare needs to be completely exploded and revamped. I think something like a health share, like typically these religious-based health shares, there's something really magical about that, because individuals have skin in the game in those circumstances. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the foundation of what we put together within the Healthy Rebellion. And so far it's gone really well. And we have capped the Healthy Rebellion membership at about 1,000 people. And I think if it got much larger than that, it would become untenable and kind of chaotic. Mm-hmm. But it's big enough that we have a lot of smart people in there and a lot of dynamicism, but it's also small enough that, and the fact that people are paying to be there, they're not jerks to one another, or much less likely to be. And so far it's done really well.
Yeah. It's amazing how people behave differently when they have to pay for something.
If it was $1, I think that they would behave in a, like the sifting process would be so remarkable. Like if you had to pay $1 to be on Instagram or something, like it would really change things in a remarkable way. Yeah,
definitely. So homesteading is another trend I think that's growing. That's actually for my family, our long-term goal is to be able to get some land somewhere and just maybe do this like some modern homesteading. Not that we, like you said, like you can't do everything on your own, mm-hmm. but I think it's good to grow some of your own food. So we've had a garden for the last 5 or 6 years and enjoyed that. I love the idea of regenerative agriculture. And I think that like one of my goals in life, if I could just raise a cow or two, I think that would make me happy. But do you think that trend's going that way? And what impact do you think that could have on like decentralizing food systems? Because I know you like to talk about that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that trend growing. There's also, interestingly, a lot of pushback against that trend, like kind of marginalizing the people doing it, which I think is really interesting. But some people somewhere don't really want folks to be more independent and not completely reliant on, kind of the established systems. I forget if this is 100% accurate, but I seem to recall that like there was some provision in the Patriot Act that if you have more than a week's worth of food on hand, you could be considered a domestic terrorist or something, and don't 100% quote me on that, but I think that that's kind of a credible thing. But that's a remarkable statement. Like think about Louisiana and hurricanes. Think about, this pipeline that just got shut down by ransomware and whatnot. Why would you not encourage a populace to have some resiliency, to have some food and water on hand? And on the one hand, they kind of do recommend that, but then on the other hand, they've got some provisions where if they want to paint you as a bad person, they can do that too. I do think that just the awareness of heading down this process of when you start growing some of your own food, then you start interacting with people nearby who raise their own food, it at least creates the opportunity for that decentralization of the food system. And what I see within that, what makes a lot of sense to me economically, is a lot more food is produced and consumed locally. It doesn't mean that we just do away with our interconnected global distribution system, like the logistics and connectivity we have, like what Walmart and Costco are able to do as far as like moving goods and services around the planet is jaw-dropping. It's really amazing stuff. And I'm not in that camp that I think that, you know, it's ridiculous that avocados from Mexico get eaten in Toronto. I'm not actually in that camp, but I think that it makes a lot of sense to investigate what things can be done at a more local level and more sustainably, you know, more of the local inputs, you know, kind of going back into the food system. And I think over time we're gonna see some move in that direction for sure.
Nice, very interesting. All right, so you recently wrote a book, Sacred Cow, guys, all about the case for better meat and regenerative agriculture. Were there any ideas or challenges that you unexpectedly encountered when you were working on that? Any, you know, I'm really going to have to rethink this as you dove into that research? Because you've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, you know, we had some, so when we've known that Diana Rogers, who's my co-author on that, we've known since at least 2010 that we were going to do some project like this, and we have both the book and the film by the same title. So if folks are interested in this, or they know somebody that might be interested but they're not going to read a book, the film is very, very accessible. But you know, when we started off with this, we had a huge list of assumptions, you know, that we started working our way through and trying to find information, and we really approached it with the mindset of let's try to disprove this thing first instead of just, okay, so as an example, there's this assumption that pastured meat is significantly healthier than conventional meat. And when we really got in and looked at all the research on that, there just wasn't a huge difference between pastured meat and conventional meat. The big, and there's been so much gnashing of teeth within kind of the meat elitist scene, in the ancestral health scene, and even the regenerative ag scene. But the real takeaway is that ruminant meat, the meat that we get from cows and goats and sheep and similar items, is just really, really nutrient dense. It's very, very healthy. Like there's a lot of nutrition there. And it's what those animals are incredibly good at doing is taking low nutrient density stuff and consolidating it and turning it into high nutrient density stuff. And pastured dairy is much more nutritious than conventional dairy. Pastured eggs are more nutritious. Wild caught fish is more nutritious than farmed fish. So there are differences out there, but I could make the case that pastured meat is better from an ethics perspective because of the way it's treated, and it's better from an environmental perspective because the inputs are more sustainable. But even that said, conventional animals raised in the conventional system spend 70 to 80% of their life on grass. They're not eating grain the whole time. Like there's some finishing where there's some grain involved, but they mainly exist on grass. So even the conventional model of beef production is far more sustainable than pork and poultry, which are 100% grain and soy fed. Like they are completely dependent on these kind of agricultural inputs. And that was a pretty good surprise. And it also has created no small amount of drama within the communities that we are a part of. You know, there are folks that insist that there's a huge difference between the nutritional qualities of conventional meat and pastured meat. And with the current data that we have available, there's just not a strong case to make that. And that's been interesting to deal with the backlash around that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you brought that point, because when I read the book, that was kind of what stuck out to me. I had been hearing that, I think it was John Wellborn couple of years ago was just talking about like if you're going to spend the extra money on poultry and that stuff first before you spend the extra money on pasture raised beef and stuff. But when I read it in your book, I mean, you really laid out the case that conventional meat seems to be just about as healthy, but like you said, from an ethical and environmental standpoint, it is much better to try to pasture raise these animals. So I thought that was very interesting. I appreciated that. The documentary was awesome. We watched that, and it's called Holy Cow Farm Fresh. They're in Indiana. They're on your documentary. We recently bought a cow and a pig from them. We split one with my wife's sister.
Oh,
so
nice.
If it wasn't for that movie, we wouldn't have known they were there. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You also are, I respected your work from like a business standpoint, just seeing you build your business over 10 years. And, me, I'm trying to start out with this podcast, trying to control some of the source of my own income to be a little bit more resilient. What advice could you offer those who are working on building a business kind of based on a personal brand? I think you've done a really bang up job. And since you've been in almost the inception of podcasts, just what can you share with those who share that dream?
Man, this is something I'm still trying to understand myself. Like, I have a modest, say, like social media reach. In theory, our podcast is a top 1% podcast. Really what that means is that there are a lot of podcasts that get almost no downloads, and because there's some huge ones like Tim Ferriss and Joe Rogan that just have massive followings. But it's interesting what I've discovered. God, how do I want to say this? There's a tendency when interacting on social media to follow that dopamine hit of likes and interaction. And there's definitely some legitimate feedback, loop there. Like, if what you're posting is worthless, nobody's really going to interact with it. But there's also this flip side that we tend to see a disproportionate degree of engagement when people are kind of hyperbolic and over the top, like they're carnivore is the only way to eat and all plants are poison. And, people like that, they get a lot of bandwidth, they get a lot of following. And I think it can be disheartening on the one hand for folks that are just trying to have a very balanced approach to things. But what's kind of interesting that I've been observing, I've got 100,000 Instagram followers, about 100,000 folks on Facebook between the two platforms, 100,000 Twitter followers. So it's modest. It's decent size. There's a lot of, there's a lot of people that would love to have that level, but comparatively it's pretty modest. But what I've discovered is that because I try not to be a complete dork in the way that I approach this stuff. I try to make it evidence-based, try to have some fun, also take some risks talking about some things that are a little bit controversial, but also what I've discovered is asking questions is much more helpful and much less likely to get me canceled than like making particularly emphatic statements. But what I've found is that my reach and impact, I'm punching way above my weight class. Like, I know folks that have 500,000, 1 million, Instagram followers or what have you. And they may post a picture of themselves after they worked out and they're jacked and lean and everything. But then when it comes time to rally the troops for a movie, a documentary, a fundraising deal for regenerative ag or something like that, the engagement those folks have is very, very low. It's as if they had a small fraction of the followers that I have. So I guess that's one thing that's been interesting, and I still don't know the right and wrong around it. I have social media accounts, but I'm not really on there. I write up some stuff. I have my assistant post it, and I don't really interact on it. Like the main places folks are able to have a conversation with me is either the Healthy Rebellion or the Q&A that we do as part of the Healthy Rebellion podcast. And I honestly wasn't sure if that was going to be career suicide for me, but I had grown so unable to deal with the toxicity of social media. And I've been online for like 20 years in all kinds of forums. And I really looked at spending at least a couple hours a day answering all questions that came to me from these social media platforms. That was part of my job.
Yeah.
Like I had, my ethos was, if I help enough people, then they will be interested enough in my work that they will patronize me. And it had worked quite well for a long time, but the toxicity of social media gotten to a point where I'm like, I can't do it. So I do broadcast only, very rarely where I pop my head up and I'm like, hey, this is really me. And here's a topic that I think is worth your consideration. And if you want to chat about it, I will be available for the next hour or whatever. And I'll go back and forth with people. But I think that that's one thing to keep in mind, is that there's a alluring feedback loop due to the way the algorithms work on these social media platforms, that being kind of an over-the-top asshole works from the perspective of getting likes and getting follows and all that type of stuff. I'm not totally sold that it works from the perspective of having legit impact. Like a lot of these folks that I see doing that, I guess that's that would be the advice that I would give. And I'm not entirely sure if I'm right about that. Like, it's still something that I waffle on. It's like, well, if I were a little more hyperbolic or a little more like divisive in my message, would I have twice as much following, and then I would have that much more impact in the things that I'm doing. But the fact that I, to some degree, I think, keep my feet on the ground, then I actually get invited to be an advisor to businesses and academic institutions and stuff like that. So there's a trade-off with taking that other route. Like, you may develop a following, but there's also going to be this reality that a whole lot of people are going to just write you off as being kind of an over-the-top zealot. And even though I really try to have a balanced approach to things and be very evidence-based, and also change my mind when evidence warrants it, I still have a lot of people that hate me and just can't say enough negative things about me. And I'm kind of like, okay, I know some people just rub other folks wrong, and I totally get that. But I'm really trying to not create that like social immune response where people want to wall me away, and I still develop that. But yeah.
Man, well, it just blows my mind that some people would hate you or disagree with you that much that they'd be mean to you. But I've been following Robb for over 10 years. You said something about you changing your mind over the years, and I can't tell you how many times you've come on and said, I used to think this, well, now in light of this, I now think this. And I just think that you're somebody who has integrity. You've helped my family. I don't bring a lot of people on to talk to the parents of my listeners unless there's someone who's really benefited my life. And I think Robb's work it's good. It's beautiful. He's got true stuff. And thanks for coming on, Robb. Tell us where can people find you, and what's the next big thing you're working on?
Probably main place to track me down is robbwolf.com. Like, there's links to Sacred Cow from there. sacredcow.info is where the main website that Diana runs. And if people are interested in regenerative ag, and in particular these questions around, is animal husbandry this massive negative impact on climate change, go check that out. Like, and definitely don't believe your first pass of everything that we put forward on that. But I offer it up as maybe the mainstream narrative around this is similar to the narrative that we've seen around cholesterol and saturated fat for the last 50 years, that there was this claim that the science was settled. This is fully understood. And just last year, the Food and Drug Administration, in developing the dietary guidelines, totally walked back their position on saturated fat. They basically said it is not a nutrient of concern. Mm-hmm. This is in shocking contrast to what has happened before. And I just offer that as an example that people have presented this ironclad position on things like saturated fat and cholesterol, and there was dissent within the scientific community. They said, no, you can't say that. That's not accurate. Here's all this stuff. And it's taken the better part of 50 years to get them to just kind of walk some of that back. And I'm just suggesting that we may have a similar situation with regards to animal husbandry and climate change. Don't believe me at first pass, just at least leave a little crack of credulity in your mind that may in fact be the case, and then get in and educate yourself around that. And yeah, I mean, robbwolf.com and then Sacred Cow are probably the most valuable places for folks to go kick the tires on the stuff that we're doing. Awesome.
Yeah. If you are just wanting to eat healthier, if you have autoimmune conditions, if you're interested in ketogenic diet for different therapeutic reasons, or just want to know how to eat a more nutrient dense diet, I would send you to Robb Wolf. He's my guy. I guess that's it, Robb. Thanks for coming on so much. Good to talk to you in person.
It's huge honor. And, it's honestly folks like you doing really good work that allows me to share some of what we're doing with new audiences and new people, because the tech platforms thus far have not really pinched on the podcast medium. So there is this opportunity for folks to begin developing a relationship with different people and different ideas. And so thank you for doing what you're doing. Like, it's a non-trivial amount of work. There's a cost benefit thing that folks like you have to make. Like, is this going to be worthwhile to do this thing? Like, am I going to help enough people? Is there actually going to be some financial reward at the end of the day for doing this? And props to you for getting in and doing that. That's awesome.
Thank you, sir.